Hey, what's up? Today I'm going to show you how we stamp the concrete at my new office. This is from a few days ago when we were forming the patio. This is pretty simple. I didn't really record much forming, but the way this works is that we are going to start the pad up here and we're going to have it fall that way. Pretty obvious. And that is 12 feet. This distance is 12 feet and we're going to do a 1/4 inch per foot, which is 3 inches. So since we have that wall that's level, we actually just measured down 3 inches there to the top of the form, and we're going to put that board in flat level first. And then once that gets in level, we're going to connect this one from here to here, and then it will have a 1/4 inch per foot fall on it. We also formed our front porch, and we're going to be pouring that as part of this project too. Everything's ready to go. We've installed rebar, and now all we're doing is getting our strike boards ready. And what we do is just we make sure we have a board that spans the entire width of the project so that we can strike the concrete level to the top of the forms.
So you gonna put that color in there?
Yeah, is that right?
Yeah.
We allowed to do that?
Yeah, man.
A lot of the concrete plants actually will put color in at the plant now, but we like to bring our own color. Today we're going to use Sand Buff Colorcrete from Increte Systems. These bags are actually made to where they will disintegrate in the truck as they're mixing, but we're going to dump the color out of the bag today because it speeds up the mixing process. Once all the color was added, I grabbed a water hose and rinsed all the extra color into the truck. We're going to let it mix for a few minutes and then we should be good to go. Now all we have to do is back the truck up and pour it out. We chalked a line on the wall on the left side of the screen, and the first critical thing to do is to hand float the concrete right to that chalk line. We're trying to rake the concrete so that it appears to be level. And then once the concrete is poured, we take a board and we strike the concrete off. And what I'm doing here is I'm trying to hold the board on top of the concrete forms, and then on the left hand side of the screen I'm trying to keep the board floating on top of the concrete that I hand floated to the line that we chalked on the left side. We're also pouring the front porch today too at our new shop, and this one's a little bit easier than the back. If you look on the left-hand side of the screen up against the house, you can see that I nailed a treated 1x4 to the house. So this one's going to be as simple as just pouring the concrete out, and then we run the strike board on top of that treated 1x4 against the house, and we let it ride on top of the forms out in the yard, and we just strike the concrete off. And now we're going to run a bull float over both pads. This is a pretty simple process. You literally just push the bull float backwards and forwards over the entire surface, and the goal is to push gravel down and bring cream to the surface. We like to run our edger pretty early in the process. An edger is a tool that makes the edges of the concrete pad have a slight radius on them. You can see here that Troy's running an edger around the perimeter of the pad, and I'm following behind him with the hand float, and all I'm trying to do is get any lines out that he leaves on the surface with the edger tool. I know earlier in the video you saw us put color in the concrete, and we actually colored the concrete that we poured, but I actually think this is the better way to color concrete. You can do one or the other, or you can do both. This is called broadcasting color hardener, and color hardener is a blend of sand, Portland cement, and pigment, and you broadcast it on the surface, and then you trowel it into the surface, and that colors the concrete. We did both on this job just because it makes the whole job a little bit easier. It's hard to color the concrete perfectly evenly when you're throwing color hardener, so it's nice to have color in the truck because it makes throwing color hardener a little bit easier. But you can do one or the other. Putting it in the truck, that's obviously easier. I just think that throwing color hardener on top makes for a better product. Concrete always tends to crack off of any outside corner, so we're going to install a control joint off of this corner, which means we're going to try to control where the concrete is going to crack. I'm making this video about a week after we poured this, and I went outside and took a picture of it just now, and it actually did crack. It's only been a week and it already cracked in the control joint, so it worked. This is called a Fresno or a trowel. What we're going to do is just trowel the entire surface, and what this does is it works the color hardener into the surface, and it also slicks the concrete down. Before we stamp this pad, we're going to run the edger around the perimeter one more time. Then once we're done edging, we're going to take a hand trowel and trowel any rough spot smooth. I wasn't able to get the porch as smooth as I would like to, so I got a few pieces of wood and I went out on the slab and I hand troweled all the rough spots. There's definitely a better way to do this. I left my D-boards, or some people call them sliders, back at our other shop, so I'm just going to make do with wood today. I'll leave a link in the description so you can see the knee boards and all the other tools that we're using in this project. Schaefer's broadcasting gray release agent onto the pad. This powder provides a secondary color to the finished product, and it also keeps our stamps from sticking to the concrete. Troy's using a really thin stamp called a skin. This skin has the texture of whatever pattern we're using, and he stamps the edges and any tight corners where it would be hard for a rigid stamp to flex and be able to reach the surface. The pattern we're using today is Increte Systems' large random flagstone. When it's time to stamp along the walls, we use what Increte Systems calls a liner stamp. Not really sure why they call it that, but our guys renamed them floppies. So they bend the floppy stamp and they get it as close to the wall as they can. You can see here that Schaefer's coming behind us with an S tool, and he's just chiseling the lines so that the grout lines connect all the way to the wall. We stamped the back patio the same way we did the front porch, only this time we're going to use wood plank stamps, and the only real difference here is that the wood plank has a lot of detail in the stamp. We wanted to be sure that the detail of the wood plank stamps was going to transfer through the concrete pad, so we made sure that we tamped every single square inch of the pad after we put the stamps on it. The next day we're going to come back and strip the forms. Before we can clean and process the pads, we have to stamp the sides of the concrete. First, we're going to mix some of the color hardener with a 50-50 mix of polymer and water. The specific products we're using are Increte spray deck resin and color hardener. We didn't weigh anything or measure anything. We just made a mix that we knew was going to be thick enough to stick to the sides of the concrete. As a side note, I got to use my new paddle cleaner that Columnix sent me. You fill the bucket with water, and then you just dip the paddle in the bucket and run it for a few seconds, and it comes out perfectly clean. It was a huge time saver. And there's not a lot of technique to this. I mean, We literally just smear the material on the side of the pad. He's just trying to get it on there to be about 3/8 of an inch thick. That's what we're shooting for, at least, because that's how deep these stamps are on the top of this pad. Once Troy gets the material on the side, I just run a flat trowel over it just to smooth it out. You don't have to wait very long to stamp this material because it actually sets up pretty fast. So as soon as we get it trowel smooth, we're going to throw release on it and then stamp it. We're going to use our stamp skins to stamp the sides. This just puts a rock texture on the sides first. And then once the sides are stamped, we're going to take our S tool and draw the lines to match the top. Stamping the sides of the wood plank patio is a little more challenging. We're actually going to use the floppy stamp. This has the texture and the lines that go between the wood all on one stamp. So when we do this, we just have to make sure that the stamp matches perfectly with what's on the top. After we let the sides cure overnight, we're going to come back the next day and wash the concrete to get it ready for sealer. The first step is just to rinse off all the excess release agent. Some people do this part with the pressure washer, but I think it's too much trouble to get it out, so I just use a water hose. Once the release agent is washed off, we're going to make a mixture of muriatic acid and water. I'm mixing this at about 6 parts water to 1 part acid. We spray this mixture on the entire surface, and then we agitate it with the brim. The goal here is to remove as much of that dark color release off of the surface as we can. This is probably the most overlooked step on most stamped concrete projects. If you leave too much of that release on the surface, it actually becomes a bond breaker, and it keeps your sealer from being able to stick to the concrete. After we acid wash the concrete the first time, we'll go back over it again and concentrate on all of the dark spots. Once we finish acid washing the concrete, we rinse it off thoroughly and then we let it dry overnight. We always seal the sides first so we don't have to worry about any drip marks rolling down the sides of the pad when we're sealing the top. I always like to use a solvent-based sealer when we seal stamped concrete, so today we're using Increte Systems solvent-based clear seal. Once we finish the first coat of sealer, we're just going to let it cure for about an hour and we're going to put the second coat on. Hey, thanks for watching. I've been working on some full-length tutorials, so if you want to learn more about stamped concrete or epoxy or anything else you've seen on this channel, there'll be a link in the description below where you can sign up for more information. And I'll also leave links in the description for all the products we use in this video. Alright, I'll see you next time.